Yeah, maybe we can start by talking about what you do and maybe go into.
How's this podcast? Okay. How should I say? I guess I'm an independent artist. I mainly work in bio art, bio design, and electronic media. Mainly, right now I'm interested in wearable technology. And then beyond that, designer and researcher, and also I teach at university level design schools.
So, what made you change your focus in your practice? Because you said you were actually studying film.
Yeah, so I used to be a science student before college.
Wow.
I was very bad at Chinese, but I was kind of good at this, like math and physics. And so I was a science student, but I really wanted to be an art student. And so, but the problem with me was I've never studied art, and the Chinese whole like art academy system, you have to start sketching.
Oh, like they have this secondary schools that is kind of related to the art schools.
Or like for instance, if I wanted to get into a kafa, I'd have to be like a master sketch artist, like Su Miao and stuff. And so you start training at least a couple of years before the exams. And so I didn't really have that. I think what I had was I was creative, but I had no within that framework I had no drawing skills. My drawing skills were like not their standard type of like sort of Leninist.
So even if you're applying to like these experimental art courses or like these new media stuff, they also ask for sketches?
Well, I think the baseline is you have to sketch to get in, and then you can pick your major. At least back then when I was going to school, and because I was also like very young, I started auditing contemporary art theory classes in high school in Beijing. But actually, but actually I think at the time I hadn't actually known about new media yet. I only knew about like more contemporary art, maybe postmodern. And so, I think the system back, and so what happened was my mom, I think she found this digital animation program, and then she's like, they take science students, and they have like a lower requirement. So I still have to do the drawing test, but they have other like factors they put into consideration, like your creativity, and they also look at your like science student scores, and so I got into film through that sense. Yeah, just because they usually don't take science students. Yeah, so then from there I tried a variety of things in undergrad. More like just learn myself, like design, fashion, etc., all that kind of stuff. And then I decided I wanted to do new media. So, and then I worked for 2 years and went to Parsons. I'm from Beijing, or I identify maybe more with Beijing because I've been there the longest. But I went to California when I was 4. My mom and dad were there for 9 years, and I was there for 7. Then back to Beijing when I was 11. Was in Beijing for 15 years, going to school, working a little in contemporary art and documentary filmmaking, and then went to New York for 2 years for grad school, and now in Shanghai for 6 years. Yeah.
So your parents moved to US for work or school?
PhD. Yeah.
Okay. What do they do?
So, God, I might get like details wrong. My mom, she used to work at a data center. She's retired now in Beijing. She's also worked various jobs like at IBM and other places, and also in the United States. But I think mainly, centers or companies. And then my dad, he mainly, he's a professor. and he was actually my mom's dad's student at Peking University, and so both my mom's parents and my dad they studied political science, and so he was like professor, I think at some point dean there at the School of Political Science. Yeah, Beta. Academics.
Yeah, like a whole family of intellectuals.
Sorry?
Like a whole family of intellectuals.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
And are you close with your family?
I think so. I think maybe not as close as certain other kids, but also not like distant. We're like, I think we're. Yeah, I also have a younger brother who's in Barcelona right now. Yeah.
Okay. And did they, like when you're growing up, do they tell you like what they want you to do, or they try to steer you in a certain direction with education and all that?
A little bit, but I for the most part, I think I'm fairly lucky. I think that because I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, they're Chinese, but also they spent quite a few years in the U.S. So I think my upbringing was kind of like a mix of the two, according to my mom. So I think they have different approaches. She kind of thinks that, I think when I was a kid, she probably knew me a bit better than my dad because he was always busy. And so she knew that I always wanted to be in the arts. And I kind of have no attention span or tolerance for other areas, so I couldn't, excel anyway. So she kind of knew I needed to somehow get into the arts. Whereas my dad, I think, originally, various points in life wanted me to be like an English major or professor, which I guess right now, I'm trying to be a professor. I mean, Benjamin, my husband, is a professor, so, but also an artist.
In a way that they planted the seed in your head when you're young.
Well, the thing with, I think I kind of fought it a lot because my experience going to school in China was kind of, at times horrific to me and traumatizing, so I think the only school that I didn't feel really kind of traumatized of was maybe high school. But even then, that was uncomfortable.
Traumatized because of the pressure, or?
No, not because of the pressure. Ideology, because a lot of stuff is kind of weird to me. I mean, there was pressure, of course. I mean, my Chinese wasn't the best growing up. But I think a lot of the, I used to also like to write a lot. So growing up, there was art. And then I also loved biology. And then writing. And so I used to write a lot. But then I kind of stopped after I started going to school in China. One is you don't have as much time for creative writing, but also it was very restricted on what I could write in Chinese. I felt and also when, writing English, a lot of the faculty were too junior to read my writing in English, so even at the college level, so then I think for me, I decided to pursue art more. Yeah, I still love writing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to give up, right?
Yeah.
And they were always okay with it. Like, do they understand what you do, or do they try to understand?
Yeah, I think they try to understand. They tolerate me. I think they're starting to understand a bit more. I think one thing with our family is they do spend a lot of. I think both parents at different levels try to spend a lot of time trying to understand, or at least trying to communicate about what I do. It doesn't always make sense to them, but also I think my mom, she makes a larger effort, I think, to try to understand. But also with my dad, he comes from the social sciences, and so he does sometimes ask me questions from an outside of the art world kind of perspective, I think, which is helpful to keep you grounded, because I think if you're doing art and it's all about art and there is no other reference to other areas or disciplines, you kind of become redundant, or you're referential of other people's work, or just so I think it's important to also be to sort of oh god, what's the word, interrogate art from other perspectives, as well as sort of bring other perspectives as an entry point for art.
Mm-hmm. And would you say your ideology aligns with your parents, or
No.
like completely? What's the main conflict then?
The main conflict. It's different. I think it's different during different periods of like our lives. I think like maybe right now. Right now, actually, it's very smooth sailing. It's been smooth sailing for a few years, but I think that when I first met my husband, he was the biggest conflict for a few years. He's 10 years older than me, and he's white, which I think back then my parents had different issues. They had issues with him, but they had different reasons. So some of it might have been the age. Also, he taught at the school that I got into, but he mainly taught undergrad. He didn't really teach me and then I think it's a very different academic culture between U.S. and China. So like in China, I think it's very taboo. I actually, in retrospect, like our grandparents' generation, I think actually quite a lot of people dated their professors. It was quite popular back then, but then I think at some point it became very taboo. And then I think in the U.S. at grads, I mean, if you're an undergrad, yeah, it's very taboo. But I think at the grad level, as long as you don't take their courses, they don't directly have like a grading relationship with you. That should be fine.
So they were more worried about the dynamic of the relationship rather than like the cultural aspect that is foreign.
Yeah, they were, I think, more worried about the dynamic because they knew that I would probably end up with an American. I think though maybe they thought it would be more Asian American, not like white American, but big same difference. But because I think that like when I was a kid growing up, they could see that I didn't really fit very well into China. But that said, and also like a lot, I got bullied a lot because kids are like young, and especially if they haven't gone to other countries to live, they may be a little bit more one-sided, and so they make comments that could be sort of mean or ignorant, but they're kids. But the thing is, so I actually got labeled a lot while I was growing up in China as like American, which I think because it was almost like a semi-bullying, so then I held on to that identity. But when I actually went to New York the first year, was still a cultural shock to me because I realized that actually I don't like the stereotypical American at all. I completely do not relate to, and so and I think right now I'm more happy at like a middle ground.
So what did it take to convince your parents that your relationship this is it,
Time.
How long? So they kind of just gave up, or it's more like...
I think that it took, let me see. So Ben and I have been together for 8 years now. We've been married for 5. My mom met him in 2017.
Oh.
2 years ago. So like, we've been married for almost 5 years. So she met him like, I want to say 2 years, 3 years after that.
So she refused to meet him before then, or it's just avoiding it?
Avoiding it, I would say. I think in the beginning it was more like she refused, but then I think it was towards the middle, my understanding, we've never talked about it, it was just kind of like, okay, that phase is over, let's just move on, but I think from my interpretation, it's probably, at first it was very like strong denial, but then later on it was like, okay, well, you know. So actually we planned a family like vacation in Wisconsin where Ben's family is, or majority of his family. They've also never been to Wisconsin, they've only been to East and West Coast, and so we did that almost like a, like, okay, let's just all meet. It's been a while, you know, kind of thing. And it's
from
like
nothing
more
to
casual.
like vacation together.
Huh?
She went from like nothing to vacation together.
But my dad, when we moved to Shanghai, I think after we got married, because also we're really busy a lot of the times, and when we are back in Beijing, we're like on business trips, or there's a conference or whatever. So I think after we got married, my dad did come the next trip that he took to Shanghai for work. He had dinner with us, and then we went, and then like before, I think maybe before or after, I forget, he met my mom. We also went to my grandpa's house. He's met my grandma before he's met any of my grandparents, because my grandma in Beijing from my mom's side, she's kind of like I don't agree with what they're doing. I think we should all just have lunch. So she had lunch with Ben and I. Yeah. But I think it's more like I mean, like, you know, I think the whole some parts of the Asian culture, it's not like it's not like Western culture where everything is out in the open. Let's all discuss it and break it down, you know, analyze. It's more like okay, that was like that then, and now it's moving towards this phase, and you know, and then if you're over the hump, then you kind of just let it go. Yeah.
Do you think it would have been harder if you didn't have a brother? Like, then they're so focused on you that you must like marry someone that is like what they want, right?
I was a little shocked at the response to Ben, because growing up they've always been very open, I think, in this area. I mean, they are still, compared to like a fully American family, you know, probably not as much, but they're still pretty open, I think, for an Asian Chinese family. And so I wasn't like, you know, a lot of families, and also they're like academics, so it's you know, I think they're open in that sense as well. But for instance, I was never required to like marry someone who had fang shui, you know. I was never like, you have to go. I think my mom maybe tried to set me up once with a banking person a long time ago, and then I stood him up, and then that was the one time. And so they don't usually, and sometimes even they try to like, they have some pushy friends sometimes, like, you know, Chinese moms who are really pushy about their sons. And sometimes she even like tells them, okay, just, I don't control Vivian, and if she doesn't like it, then don't pusher, they shield me sometimes. And so I was a little surprised about the reaction towards Ben at the time. Yeah. And also I thought, like, he's an artist, he's got like piercings, he's pretty open-minded. That's what I like. He's a musician, but then he's also an academic, so my parents should like him.
So their concern with him is to you a bit like illogical.
I think for my mom's part, it was like she was very worried that people would kind of shit on me in New York. But I think because, like I said, the whole difference of academic cultures in the U.S. and China, like also just also me teaching now too, and observing how Ben teaches and stuff. It's like in the U.S., I think the power dynamic is very different. Students can complain and get people fired, get lawsuits onto schools, whereas here faculty hold more power. And so, not here, but we're in Berlin here, but in China. And so I think that maybe there was that impression that maybe I was being taken advantage of, or their impression of me was that I was more naive than I actually was. But I think I went through a lot in undergrad, actually, that they later found out that actually prepared me to deal with older people. I had like when I was starting with from when I was 21, 22, I had like artist friends who were like mostly in their 40s and 50s or above, and so Ben is very young, being when I met him and he's in his mid-30s, So I learned, it was difficult because I had to learn how to navigate that myself, and they don't belong to that world. They also didn't go through the same stuff, but I learned a lot and developed a lot with skills to cope with this kind of stuff that I think they thought I wasn't maybe ready for. Yeah.
Would you say they were overprotective parents?
Yes, I would definitely say that.
Classic Chinese
I was
parents.
very sheltered until undergrad, and then it kind of all hit me from all sides in undergrad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't identify as one, or maybe I don't like to label myself that way. I would say maybe I identify as one, but I wouldn't like to label myself that way because I've actually had interview requests by people in China that I rejected because I think they tried to box me up in the feminist package, that in a way that I didn't really like. So first of all, I think I've always grown up around very strong women. My grandma was very independent because in undergrad I did an interview of her and my grandpa about their whole life last century through the revolution and the Cultural Revolution, and all that kind of stuff. And she ran away from home in junior high school. She came from a very wealthy family, actually. She decided she needed an education instead, and then she became an academic, and she gave up her professor opportunity because Beida at the time only allowed one out of a couple, like a husband and wife, that only one person was allowed to be professor, not both. So she went to Yale, and then there she excelled to be nominated as top foreign faculty in high school in Beijing, 2 women, 2 men, and she met Mao because of her excellence, and then she went through very drastic, and so I think her whole philosophy of life, she had one daughter, she had 2 sons and 1 daughter, and so with my mom she kind of ingrained this sort of very independent way of being into my mom. And then I think my mom, unfortunately, because out of everyone in Beida, my grandpa was, I found out all of this stuff like at a fairly late age after college, but he basically, I think, was maybe one of the founders, and I may be fuzzy on the details of the current School of Political Science at Beida. And then both of them are quite well known in academia, and then so they were both put away during the Cultural Revolution. So my mom basically raised herself since like 12 or 11 during the Red Guard period, and so she because there wasn't really anyone there to sort of guide her, she missed her opportunity. She went to more like a vocational college in physics, which also is kind of confusing to me as to why that was. But she basically she missed her opportunity of picking a better college because she had no like persons advising her. So she never ended up. She had jobs, but never ended up building a career. But nonetheless, I think she's very independent, just as who she is, you know. And so to me, the whole idea of like being a strong like woman is kind of ingrained, I think, in the family, and so it's like a normal. And also, we were not treated, neither my mom or my dad's families treated. Though my dad's from like Hunan, he's from the south. They've not treated me and my brother differently. If anything, I'm more favored because I'm like the only like female child in my generation in both families. So I think so I think it's not been a big thing. And then there's this other aspect, because I do work in technology. I come from this program at Parsons called Design and Technology, and so then in the whole New York environment, there's this women in tech thing, but or women in science thing, which I can see the sort of value for such campaigns, but at the same time, these sort of more political. First of all, my work is not political. And so I want to make very clear that protect what I do. And then second of all, I don't want people to be interested in my work because I'm a woman. I want them to look at my work and say, this is good, and then find out I'm a woman, or say, okay, I see that this is made by a woman, but not because of it. And so sometimes I don't like to.
Do you find that an issue in China, that they like your work because you're a woman? Or?
So far, no, because I think also in China, I think that I tend to actually apply and get more things internationally, and rather than in China, I think like the area I'm working in, bio art, is still a very small niche.
Yeah.
And so there's maybe not as big of an audience there, or an understanding. And so I find sometimes there was a year that I didn't do any shows. I did maybe one show and didn't do. I don't do a lot of shows in general, because also it takes me a very long time to produce like my work, because it's very heavy on research. And also like raising things and studying them. So yeah, I think one aspect of that is it doesn't really work very well with the sort of the sort of art market, or the industry of contemporary art or media art
In China.
Yeah, in China, everything's kind of more like and I think. The other thing is that the times I do have an opening, I think this sort of feedback is not that interesting, because sometimes I get questions such as, why is this not a painting? It's like, well, I don't know what we can talk about then, because people do other things now sometimes, so I think, that's